Most places with reputations for being dangerous shout about it, with steep cliffs, rushing water, or height that humbles. But Glastenbury doesn't shout. It listens, and every few years, it remembers someone's name and doesn't give it back. There's no warning sign at the trailhead, no ranger posting, no bold-faced statute. Still, hikers avoid this section of southern Vermont, not because of what's there, but because of what goes quiet when you enter it. Glastenbury Mountain isn't particularly impressive from a distance. It doesn't dominate the skyline. It doesn't loom. It hides. A wide curve of wooded ridges in southern Vermont, folded beneath the Green Mountains, tucked away behind state forest signs and forgettable back roads. Just another place on the long trail. But locals know it's different. Not haunted, not exactly cursed, just watched. Ask anyone who grew up in Bennington, Shaftesbury, or Woodford, especially the ones who've hunted, tracked deer, or run lost dogs through this part of the forest. They'll never say the word Bennington Triangle. Instead, you'll get something slower. The wind goes funny up there. Birds come back late in the season. If your compass starts swimming, stop where you are and wait till it changes its mind. And more than anything else, they'll tell you, quietly, you don't turn around twice on Glastenbury. Between 1945 and 1950, 5 people vanished either on or near the mountain. It's not myth. It's not internet exaggeration. It's fact, filed in police records, ranger logs, and newspaper archives in musty libraries. Each case was different, each person unrelated, but the pattern never changed. A person enters the forest. They are seen once, then not again, not dragged off, not mauled, not found days later downriver or crumpled off a slope. Just gone. And in multiple cases, the dogs brought in refused to track. They stopped, whined, and sometimes backed away. Some handlers claimed electromagnetic interference. Others said the dogs were just overworked. But not all of them. One quote from a 1947 log stands out. They didn't act tired. They acted insulted, like they wanted to go in, but the woods were already full. The most famous of the missing is Paula Jean Welden, a college student from Bennington College. December 1st, 1946. Wearing a red coat, she told her roommate she was going to hike and clear her head. Several witnesses saw her headed toward a trail segment near Woodford. An elderly couple said they passed her on the walk, briefly. They saw her round a switchback. Then she never rounded out the other side. Never heard her behind them. Never saw a red between the trees again. Search crews combed the woods. Planes circled. Hundreds of volunteers. Newspaper headlines. Mentions as far down as New York. Nothing. Not a shred of fabric. Not a boot print. Just absence. Unresolved and repeating. But Paula wasn't the only one. Mitty Rivers, a local hunting guide, disappeared a year earlier. Hunting party of 4. Out near the same corridor. He was in front, turning a corner on a well-known trail he'd walked for 20 years. The next person behind him took 10 more steps, and the trail was empty. When they rushed to catch up, assuming he was ahead, nothing. No bent branches. No broken canopy. No impression in soft ground. Just a single bullet casing, polished clean, sitting on a moss stone like it had been placed, not dropped. And then James Tedford. His case may be the most unsettling. A war veteran. On a bus. Counted on board. Ticket validated. Last seen sleeping in his seat as the bus passed through the Glastenbury region. When they arrived, gone. Luggage untouched. No stops between last check and final destination. It makes no logistical sense. But then, disappearances here rarely do. 2 more disappearances followed. A child, Paul Jepson, who vanished after telling his mother about a man in the woods who told him where time didn't matter. And a final case, Frida Langer, the only one whose body was ever recovered. 7 months after her disappearance, it was found in a clearing already searched several times, lying neatly in tall grass. No obvious cause of death. Autopsy inconclusive. But the note that remains in the ranger file chills more than any other. Body shows no evidence of trauma, exposure, or predation. Area shows no evidence of disturbance. Subject appears returned. Over time, the stories kept surfacing. Not always full vanishings, but moments. Lost time. Flags moved. Red ribbons tied that no one owned. Compass behavior bending in rings. Sound stopping, not fading. Stopping. In 1997, a trail cam running a time-lapse captured something unusual. At 2:06 p.m., a breeze clears the canopy. At 2:08, everything goes still. Frames repeat, exact shadows, exact angles. 2 seconds loop 8 times before the forest resumes. No data glitch, no footage corruption, no wind pattern for 10 minutes. Later, a patch of moss was found in that exact spot. Pressed down, shaped like a human form, but no prints leaving. You won't find warning signs on trailheads in Glastenbury. No talk of ghosts or cryptids on tourist signs. But if you stay long enough, you'll hear one refrain. There are trails in that mountain that don't want remembered. And if you walk them too many times, they might learn how you walk, too. Maps of the region change subtly every decade. Trail renewals shuffle switchbacks. Cairns built to mark wrong paths decay in half the time they should. It's as if the forest doesn't erase what happened. It's just redrawing how it begins. What scares those who know the mountain isn't what took those 5 people. It's how quiet the taking was. Not a scream, not a rustle, just one footstep missing from the sequence. And no echo afterward. In 2022, someone returned, not to find what was lost, but to measure the edges of the spiral that seemed to grow every time someone walked its curve. She didn't come to chase legends. She came to find the missing line on the map, the one her grandfather never finished. In June 2022, Lily Hammond, a forest surveyor with the Vermont Natural Resources Council, requested leave from her project near Groton. She didn't tell anyone at work why. The reason was handwritten. Inside a field book wrapped in a canvas pouch, brown with age, marked age. Her grandfather, Arthur Hammond, had mapped parts of the Green Mountains in 1973, contracted by the state to walk unmarked logging corridors, including those near Glastenbury. What should have been a 7-day survey ended in 3, because Arthur vanished for the middle part of it. 3 days. No call. No word. When he emerged at the ranger station, midnight, barefoot and shaking, he brought no gear, and wouldn't speak clearly for days. The only entry from right before it happened was one phrase. Switchbacks keep repeating. West is always back. The spiral isn't looping, it's choosing. And under that, scribbled and circled in red pen, don't let the trail remember you. Lily didn't grow up with ghost stories. She grew up with maps. Her grandfather never called himself lost. He called himself rerouted, often with an ambiguous smile, like he couldn't quite say what he meant. Sometimes he mumbled strange phrases when sunlight hit the kitchen blinds just right. Never backtrack a bend. If you hear your name in the trees, it's already heard you first. You can walk out of the woods, but they might still be walking inside you. When he died, she inherited his archive, and for the first time, read through the margins he never published. Twisted contour lines, mirrored versions of his original trail charts, spirals overlaid on elevation grids, a stack of markers labeled dates, but not locations. She didn't mean to get obsessed, but at some point, following what Vanish started feeling less risky than wandering forever. She arrived outside Bennington mid-June, rented a small A-frame near Somerset Reservoir, stocked with mapping gear, a GPS echo logger, infrared scanner, and triangle compass with barometric sensor. And one more thing she didn't mention when checking in with the park office, a roll of red tag tape. Survey standard, cloth-based, not plastic, not reflective. She didn't plan to use it. Not really, but if something repeated, she wanted to know. The first few days were uneventful. She followed old routes cataloged by her grandfather. Most were overgrown, others barely existed. But even then, the mountain felt too curated. The bends were wrong, not sharp enough to be shortcuts, not flat enough to claim erosion. Tree growth leaned unnaturally outward in places where it should tighten. And one trail, a soft-sloped ridge, with perfect forest silence at 10:49 a.m. each day. 3 days in a row. Same time. No birds. No wind. Just held silence that felt less like absence and more like the trees bracing themselves for something. On day 4, just before noon, her compass pulled in a slow arc. Not a spin. Not a glitch. A smooth escalation counterclockwise, similar to the spiral diagrams her grandfather had shaded over trail junctions 50 years earlier. She dropped the soft marker, logged it, turned around. It was gone before she took 10 steps. She tagged another tree. Same fabric, same knot. Walked on for 3 minutes. Passed a flag already tied to another branch ahead. Before she could place it. Her knot. Her style. But mint clean, unweathered, and 1 centimeter shorter than the tag she held in her hand. She didn't continue the loop that day. Instead, she drew, sat with her knees in the moss, and sketched the tree placements and curvature of trail angles that had not been on her maps. When she checked her recorder back at the cabin, static filled around 2:13 p.m. Then a single phrase, spiral, recorded. Her voice, but spoken before her real log note had been made. She didn't remember saying it. Day 6. Between 2 low pines. Cairn. 6 stones. Clean. Flat top. On the surface, 3 letters carved lightly. A. H. M. Arthur Hammond. Her grandfather. She froze. What disturbed her wasn't the age of the carving, but the type of lichen on the stone. New. Bright gray-green. The cairn had not been there for long, yet the initials had already had time to become worn. That night, she dreamed of the cabin floor stretching under her feet, would peeled itself into a slow spiral. Not broken, just softening the grid beneath her boots. In the dream, she heard something whisper, not to her, but beside her. Over and over again, don't turn back on your own name. She woke with her hands folded neatly across her chest, her boots laced, her field book open to a page she hadn't written on yet, but now contained a message, jagged compass-drawn lines underlining one sentence. Some trails unfold when walked. This one folds as it remembers. The GPS logger showed she had moved 14 meters during the night. She still hadn't used the red tape, but on her walk that morning, 8 tags hung across a switchback. All tied, all clean, each one facing inward toward the mountain, not outward toward the trail start. The last one fluttered as she stopped. When she reached for it, the tape broke in her hand, fell away without tension. The spiral had begun responding, not chasing, not threatening, learning. The forest wasn't watching her because she was dangerous. It was matching her pattern. The first rule of Glastenbury isn't spoken by people. It's taught by the wind. When it stops moving, when footsteps gain weight, when even your name starts sounding heavier than it should. There's a difference between quiet and silence. Quiet is natural, expected, peaceful. Silence, true silence, is surgical, engineered. It presses down. It decides what doesn't belong. And on Glastenbury Mountain, silence tends to arrive early in the day. That's how Lily first began to feel watched. On the 7th morning, the wind was gone. Not gone. No leaf movement, no branch creak, no insects, just the kind of air that fills your ears like static, not by making sound, but by removing all of it. She stood beneath a maple arch, west slope, altitude 2,909 feet. At 10:47 a.m., a small squirrel leapt onto a dead branch, and the world flattened. Even its landing made no noise. She reached for her recorder, hit playback. Nothing. No ambient track for the last 62 seconds. And yet, the system still registered input. It was recording, but not what she was hearing. Or maybe it was hearing, and not sharing. She turned back. Just 10 steps. Sound returned. As sudden as a dropped curtain. Branches shook like they'd just been delayed in the wind. She checked satellite weather. Normal movement. But the air around her hadn't moved slowly. It had paused. And that, she would write in her field notes, is when she began to understand. Glastenbury doesn't always stop you from walking. Sometimes it just stops reacting to see what version of you keeps going. That same night, inside the cabin, something subtle shifted. She heard a knock, not at the door, not even on the cabin's walls. Just a firm, dull compression, like a knock behind a thought. Like something well beneath the floor had pressed against the ground before deciding to rise. She didn't answer it, didn't log it out loud. When she awoke the next morning, her notebook was open beside her left hand. She had not gone to sleep with it. The sentence written across the page, lines centered, as if measured, was familiar. If the forest falls quieter than you, stand. She followed a known side path, confident, intentional. 45 minutes in, she passed a tree she'd flagged 2 days earlier. Only now, her original tag hung next to a duplicate. Same red cloth, same knot mirrored. Someone, or something, had mimicked the position down to the frayed edge. But the duplicate was too clean, untouched by weather. It shouldn't look that new. If it was tied after hers, it had to have been within the last 36 hours. She reached for her camera, but before she could photograph it, a breeze whispered through, just one sweeping pull, and only one flag moved. The other hung still. as if the tree around it wasn't real. She hadn't started hallucinating. She still ate 3 meals. Logged sleep nightly. Hydration, consistent. Altitude acclimation, steady. No psychotropic response, no fungal contamination. Just patterns tightening. Equations rearranging their shape. At 12:19 p.m., her mic picked up humming again. Not actual hum, but a deep mechanical stand-in for silence. Distance pressing down. Pressure displacing presence. Even her heartbeat slowed a few beats per minute. That afternoon, she found her gloves set outside the cabin door. She didn't remember placing them there. She hadn't even worn them in 2 days. They were folded, perfectly aligned. One red thread sewn into the right cuff. A thread not there when she'd bought them. That's when the dreams started shifting. Before this point, they were encoded memory review, landmarks, path redraws, knots she'd tallied wrong. But now she was dreaming of distance. Inches stretching into yards. Clearings that opened wide enough to blink. She stood among cairns that breathed after she did. And in one moment, a voice, not cold, just procedural, spoke beside her dream's ear. "We've heard enough of the regular wind. Try giving silence your name next time." She never spoke while hiking again. After 12 days on the mountain, Lily developed a new rule. If the birds go quiet faster than your own thoughts, don't speak out loud for the next 3 bends. That ended up saving her on the 13th day. At 2:42 p.m., she rounded what should have been a fork. Instead, another clearing. Not wide, ritualistic, anchored by something she couldn't name. Just off. The stones ahead weren't scattered the way erosion or snowfall would make them. They were placed, stacked, deliberate, temporary, but confident. A signal so precise, it didn't need to be loud. Instead, it just waited to be noticed. And that, she didn't approach. She turned, retraced every single step exactly. Didn't speak, didn't make a log, didn't breathe too fast. And halfway back, the crickets started chirping again, in perfect sync. She returned to the cabin quietly, made one change in her journal, crossed out her earlier notation, "The trail responds to noise," and rewrote, "The trail responds to its absence." She boiled water, drank tea, sat with her feet in her boots, laces undone. The room was still. But now, the stillness wasn't holding tension. It was recording something, waiting for her next move, not to copy it, but to confirm it matched what came before. Because in places like Glastenbury, ritual isn't invented by people. It emerges from the forest, patiently watching the patterns we don't realize we're repeating. What begins with silence continues in duplication. And if the trail starts returning things you didn't lose, it's worth asking what it hopes you'll offer next. Some places want to be found. Others just want to see who's watching them, long enough to imitate. By day 14, Lily Hammond had stopped asking whether Glastonbury was dangerous. The question had changed. Now she was asking if the forest was practicing her. It started subtly. Objects out of place. Not missing, not stolen. Identified. Repositioned. Mirrored. Her pen. A backup Stettler marker with a bent cap, tucked behind her ear since week 1. She always used it in the morning, always returned it to the outer pouch of her bag. Until the day she didn't reach for it, because it was already out. Stuck lightly into the spine of her journal, left open to that morning's date, before she'd written anything there. Same pen, same cap bend, same light bite mark. No explanation. Then her gloves. Again, hung neatly over her cabin's handrail. This time clean, fully dry, smelling faintly of pine resin and charcoal, although she hadn't used either that day. And this time, folded with the left glove first. Lily always stacked right over left. Ritual. Habit. Small stuff. But small stuff matters when you live on patterns. She started cataloging them. First occurrence, pen. Second, gloves. Then her old ribbon tags. Instead of finding them weather-stained and crusted to wind-bent branches, they started appearing clean, crisp. Same fold, same knot, slightly shorter. The cuts were more efficient, like something had studied how she tied cloth and replicated it without waste. One even had a faint mark she hadn't made, a single arc of graphite, like a reverse parenthesis. It wasn't helpful. She wished it were malicious. Malice could be fought. This felt observational, like walking through the limits of a reflection constructed from invisible material. Each step she took, the trail watched how she laid weight. Each gesture she repeated, Eventually, it offered back. Not aggressively, gently, almost politely, but with the weight of a test. She built a new rule. If something you've lost shows up too early, it doesn't mean you've gained it back. It means the trail thinks you're ready for the next piece of the pattern. On day 16, she found her field recorder resting on a stump. Not her backup, her primary unit. It was plugged into a battery she didn't carry in the field. The display was blank. Damaged? Maybe. But as she reached for it, the screen flickered once, displaying a date and time. September 23rd, 1973, 4:11 p.m., exactly the timestamp of her grandfather's final GPS ping. Arthur Hammond had vanished for 3 days beginning the following morning. The next moment, the screen dimmed. No power left. She hadn't even turned it on. When she opened the battery port, something clattered out. A small piece of rock. Flat. Rounded. With a piece of red cloth pressed tightly around it. That evening, she checked her grandfather's journal again. One page had changed. Still his handwriting. Still the old pen ink. But there was now a circled line she didn't remember seeing before. When red turns up clean, you're walking the trail's version, not your own. The woods the next morning were too bright. Not hot, but exposed. As if the trees knew how to stand looser, letting more light press through in compensation. She hiked anyway. Part reflex, part dread, part compulsion that no longer felt fully hers. At the third curve west of the Ridgebend saddle, she saw it. Her scarf, folded on a broken birch branch. The exact scarf she'd burned 6 days ago. After a red knot had appeared in it, she hadn't placed herself. Now it was whole, unburned, and embroidered with a small spiral she definitely hadn't added. 7 turns inward. No center. She picked it up. It was dry, clean, warm, as if someone had placed it just minutes before. She didn't speak the rest of the hike. Didn't make a sound until she returned to the cabin and logged the reality plainly. Trail has started returning items too quickly. Copies are becoming primary. Reconvergent moments accelerating. I don't know if I'm behind or ahead anymore. That night, she found a voice memo saved, time-stamped while she was asleep. 3:41 a.m. Her own voice, reading a sentence she hadn't yet written. If I mirror the forest long enough, will it stop needing the original? She deleted the file, turned off the recorder, but something had changed. The trail no longer wanted to see if she returned something. It wanted to know if she'd notice when the returned version wasn't hers anymore. And by the time she did, it had already. The next morning, her footprint on the porch had company. A second print. Same boot imprint. Same weight. But 2 parallel to hers. Like she'd stepped twice. Only she hadn't. She measured stride length. Angle. Snowdrift compression. Everything matched. 2 identical steps, laid out like a line being drawn twice by the same hand. Uncertain which one it wanted to keep, she brushed them away. Waited. By dusk, they had returned. Light. Placement. Same again. But this time, her gait analysis app showed an inconsistency. Lateral knee tension differed. One line bore the exact subtle limp from an old trail injury she hadn't logged in months. The other didn't. The trail wasn't replacing her. It may not even have been haunting her, but it was correcting her data, fixing her, filtering, auditing each repeated behavior, until it would eventually determine which version of her was most sustainable for the forest to keep feeding forward. Sometimes, the trail tests your gear, then your memory, and when you still don't fold, it speaks, quietly, with a name you once gave yourself. There's no reason to say your name in the forest. No practical one. Not when you're alone. Not when you already know who you are. But somewhere on day 17, Lily realized something important. She hadn't said her name out loud since she'd arrived. And still, something had started saying it first. It began as coincidence. She'd be narrating a field note, describing ridge angle or trail curvature. And from the edge of her audio logs, her name. Soft, casual, no breath behind it, but clearly spoken. Once. Flat. Like someone testing a bell to hear the tone. Lily. She heard it 10 times in review before she heard it once live. And when she did, it was from the trees behind her. A few yards back. Perfect tone matched to her grandfather's voice. Except he'd been dead for 11 years. In a recovered half-page entry from Arthur Hammond, dated October 1973, she found this line. It doesn't drag you under. It brings something out to stand where you would have been. Which only made sense later. That evening, Lily was speaking into her recorder. Just a simple phrase. Path splits. Ridge on one side. Erosion on the other. She paused. The moment echoed back. Identical, same words, 2 seconds before she said them. She played the audio back 3 times. At first, it seemed like a sync issue, until she stopped talking entirely, and the pattern continued. The recorder began predicting her. Not her words. Her emotional cadence. Light inhalation before she asked a question? Already there. Tension before climbing an uneven slope? Audible in her next step before she took it. A trail is a footprint memory. That's how her grandfather used to describe it. But Glastenbury? This trail wasn't remembering where she was. It was testing where she would have gone instead. When she returned to the cabin that night, her scarf, the one she had decided not to wear that week, was folded on her pillow. Washed. Dried. Sewn into one side. Lily, just her name. None of it made sense. She hadn't spoken it. Not once. She hadn't labeled her belongings. And yet the forest was saying it now. There's a difference between being called and being rehearsed. And the next morning, what Lily heard wasn't a voice in the trees. It was a voice inside her earpiece. Headphones meant only for playback hissed once during trail review and returned a single word. Again. Followed by Lily, followed by nothing. Except bootsteps her recorder logged before her mic was turned on. Somebody, or something, wasn't just observing her. It was measuring value. Each pattern, phrase, hesitation she made seemed to feed something. A growing profile of who she was when she thought no one was listening. And like it had done with her scarf, her gear, her markers, the trail had now begun trying to speak for her. Rule 3 emerged late. From a whisper in a ranger's logbook, archived from 1972. Twice is an invitation. If it says your name, don't say it back. And whatever you do, don't say it again. Lily said her name once on day 18. To test what would happen. No whisper followed. She waited. Later that night, her recorder played it back to her mid-sleep, projected from the cabin's table. She never turned it on. The recorder had no batteries. Still, the tape played just fine. Not her voice. Another version, slightly slowed. Saying, Lily. Lily. Once gently, once demanding. Names are like keys in some places. They unlock, but they bind, too. Glastenbury never chased Lily. It read her, listened, and somewhere along the switchbacks of day 19, she felt it settle. She woke to a ticking sound. Not the clock, not insects, just one soft tap every 3 seconds from beneath the cabin floor. When she opened her journal, a new phrase was written. It stops calling you when it already has what it needs. She packed her bags before dawn. No dramatic ending, no sprint from the woods. Just one last glance at the trailhead, where a flag hung gently on a tree she'd never marked. Tied in her knot. Her handwriting. The word? Lily. She doesn't spell it with 2 L's. But something else might. The forest didn't want to keep her. It wanted to know which version of her walks best. Because some places don't trap you. They build you again in better rhythm. The spiral wasn't a metaphor. It was architectural. Responsive. Less like a trap. More like a recursion device. And by day 20, Lily understood. She wasn't being followed. She was being folded. The trail stopped behaving like terrain. It began behaving like memory. Roots exposed themselves in familiar patterns. Roots she had stepped across already, reshuffled into different curves. Trees grew in cluster groups that mirrored last week's path, but mirrored from south to north. Even the weight under her boots felt identical, but not in the same place. Steps didn't land differently. They landed again. Not déjà vu prescribed movement. She tried to test it. Walked 10 minutes out in a random direction. Timed. Marked. Turned. Walked 10 back. Should have arrived at her marker. Instead, she passed it halfway home. Already seated in the ground like it had been there a week. Weathered. Frayed. One thread blown loose by wind. Just like the one she watched unwind yesterday. Except this one hung upward. Against gravity. Tongue got soft. She caught herself blinking longer. Not from exhaustion, but because when she reopened her eyes, shapes would be subtly too correct. An animal trail with perfect curvature. 2 identical tree wounds, matching scar for scar. Stone placements where she hadn't stepped, which only made sense if her step was borrowed from another moment. Her grandfather's old phrase came back. The spiral doesn't pull you in. It tightens until you remake your route with so many turns. You stop knowing which version of you made it out first. At the time, she thought it was trauma speak. Now it felt like a blueprint. On the morning of day 21, her GPS gave a full reading. No errors. Down to single-digit meters. She mapped the trail with fresh elevation overlays, new IR reflectivity scans, wind angles. And then she paused, overlaid all her previous routes, labeled the timestamps. 7 routes, different days, different entry/exit points. But when layered, they drew a spiral, a perfect spiral. Each walk, just one small orbit deeper. Corresponding to what? Nothing known. She followed the route, almost involuntarily. Distance reeled her in, not forward, sideways. She stopped checking her watch. Time had become a participant, not a measurement. And then, at the bend the spiral hadn't shown her before, she found it. A clearing. Unknown. Unmapped. But symmetrical. Trees surrounded it like quiet worshippers. White pine, red cedar, birch, all leaning slightly forward, inward, as if bending to see who would enter. In the center, a circle of red cloth spun into a vortex ring. Several pieces knotted together, forming a broken whirl. Not quite continuous. It was missing one piece. One long, uncut strip to finish the spiral. She didn't walk into it. She placed a hand near the center edge. Temperature, stable. Wind, non-existent. But pulse, rising. Not hers. The spiral. She could feel its rhythm as if it were muscle, a low-frequency memory asking permission to finish construction. Finish her pattern. Her phone vibrated once. Screen still black. When she turned it on, the log time had reset to 1973, the exact date of her grandfather's missing hours. Her video app opened of its own accord. Preview window blank. Then one frame. A woman's silhouette standing in the trees across from her, unmoving. Hair like hers. Stance like hers. But thinner. Slightly taller. And blinking too slow. Then came the breath. Through the clearing. Not hers. A large one. Deep. Like a sigh pulled through bark and stone instead of lungs. And she felt, deeply, intuitively, this wasn't threat. This was selection. The spiral had rehearsed her well enough. Now, it wanted resolution. All she had to do was give it the missing flag. Close the spiral. Let herself be absorbed into the layered decisions of the place. Her pattern would remain. A coat sway. Knee bend memory. Compass lean. Something else could walk the trail from there. Does it still need the original? Maybe not. It was enough to leave a data-perfect copy. She took one step forward, then stopped, and dropped the uncut red flag outside the clearing. On a stump. Folded. Unusable. Then she turned away and whispered a word the forest wouldn't expect. No, she didn't say her name. She didn't breathe fast. She walked, backward for 20 paces, then turned, and walked a new line. Not a previous path. A new one. Deliberate. Curved. Diagonal. Disrespectful to geometry. That's what broke it. The spiral loosened. Not audibly, but spatially. Trees unleaned. Soil softened. Echoes could no longer hold form. The route didn't expel her. It simply no longer needed what she was. If it had memorized enough, the keeping part no longer mattered. That was the scariest part. At the trailhead the next morning, taped low onto the westbound trail sign, she found one last piece of red cloth. Crisp, newly cut, but not tied. Instead, pressed beneath a rock. Folded once. Underneath it, a handwritten tag. File completed. Echo stored. LH pattern match. 97.6. Handwriting. Her grandfather's. Only slightly off. She left the mountain without returning to that path again. She never hiked solo after that. Didn't need to. Because somewhere, something was already doing it for her. Maybe not with her face. Maybe not even with her name. But with her selections. Her rhythm. Her favored turns. The spiral doesn't need the original walker. Just the final, repeated choice. In Chapter 6, she made it out. But Glastenbury's version of her may have continued, and not one person would know the difference. When Lily Hammond left Glastenbury Mountain, she didn't run. There was no sprint through fog, no final pursuit, no trailhead curse. She just walked, off the ridge, through a thinning of trees that felt like a held breath exhaled, back onto familiar gravel. And the forest didn't follow, because it didn't need to. It had her, in another way. The sunlight looked softer that day, not brighter, more diffused. as if it had passed through time instead of atmosphere. She didn't raise her camera, didn't check her GPS once. There was no need. She already knew where she was. And, more unsettling, the trail did too. It had recorded her. Not just scanned, not just imagined. Replicated. At least, well enough. She stayed in Bennington one more night. Checked in at a small inn. Ordered waffles. Ate slowly. And when she pulled her bag onto the bed, something fell out. Her scarf. Again. But this time, it wasn't folded. It was slightly damp. Coated in bits of fern she hadn't passed through in days. Smelled like high-altitude moss. Not from the hike she remembered, but from the hike the mountain remembered for her. She left it outside her window. Woke the next day. It was gone. Back in Montpelier, Lily didn't talk about it. Not on tape. Not to coworkers. Not even to the researcher who'd been waiting for her logs. She archived everything. Videos, sketches, scans. Copied them onto an encrypted drive. Then deleted everything from her laptop. She didn't want the spiral anywhere near her desktop. Weeks passed. Then months. Little things started happening. She'd pass a store mirror and, for a second, not recognize her own posture. Her boots, worn in over hundreds of hikes, had a new wear pattern on the heel, as if she was dragging a foot she'd never injured. Her voicemail had one message without a recorded number. It was silence. 19 seconds of it. Right before it ended, a whisper, name filed, pattern closed. She began dreaming again, but not as herself. As a version of herself she didn't completely agree with. One that stepped faster around curves. One that never paused at ridge overlooks. One that seemed streamlined. An optimized Lily. Without the hesitation. Without the wondering. Just clean, smooth repetition. The kind of walker a trail would find useful. She returned to the spiral map once. Months later. Overlaid it on a relief PNG, just to check. The segments aligned with 3 other historic disappearance points. 1932, 1987, 2001. In each, the hiker had been seen wearing red. Each one left behind a journal, camera, or position log. And in multiple cases, something was found returned to the family that they never remembered owning. A different watch, a different boot tread, a slightly different version of the person who left. One ranger, interviewed in 1998, put it this way: "Sometimes I think that hill doesn't ask for anything. It just notices when you take too long deciding who you are." Lily never hiked solo again, but she started seeing herself. Not metaphorically, literally. In footage, in group member backgrounds. Once, in a still taken by another hiker, down by Mount Greylock. In the frame, tree line, fog, a figure, standing far from the group. In her coat. Her posture, her scarf. When asked, Lily hadn't left town in 3 weeks. There's no warning sign at the trailhead in Glastenbury. No inscription that says, "Don't leave anything behind the spiral, including your habits." But the people who live near it don't need signs. They have rules. Unwritten, but practiced. Quietly. Repeatedly. 1. Don't revisit a bend you've already passed, even if it feels like shortcut. 2. If your gear comes back cleaner than you left it, don't touch it again. 3. Walk faster through silence. Or slower. Just make sure it isn't your usual pace. 4. If the wind gets still, breathe shallow. It's not your air for the moment. 5. If something says your name once, let it go. If it says it twice, leave. 6. If the forest feels like it remembers you, it's because it does. 7. And if your name shows up sewn into an object you don't own, burn it. Gently. Where Lily is now. That doesn't matter. What matters is what's still walking the trail, step for step, name for name, scar for scar. Overcoming switchbacks with refined muscle memory. Never forgetting its gait. Never deviating. Because once Glastenbury completes a pattern, it doesn't wait around for the next version. It simply starts walking it again. Trails remember the way we move. Some trails remember it too well. And long after the real you leaves, the version it liked most